Hello and welcome once again, everybody. And I would like to thank SteelOrbis team for this beautiful organization and Çolakoğlu for their sponsorship. And as Uğur Bey mentioned, this I would like to thank Çolakoğlu for our 1 year break and the support they've provided during said break. I won't go into steel a lot because we're running low on time and we're about to give a break. I will give a different perspective to what has been said before me. First of all, yes, demand is decreasing. And this isn't the case in simply the steel industry. We see a similar trend in every industry, but if we look at the changes in the past decade, we see that global growth has reached the bottom in the decade. So, but of course, this was expected and it was predicted by many experts because it is natural that a long period of an upward trend is naturally bound to decrease. And if you look at the data gathered from around the world, the residential constructions, automobile sales, they've all peaked and it was bound to also decline since this is a cycle that we've all been going through. This is a cycle where we will peak and then we will decline and recover and continue our increase again. But this cycle created certain problems of its own. One of them is protectionism, and the other is felt quite intensely in the automobile industry with the changes in technology and the behaviors of the consumers and their values. There have been some changes, and these changes affected their purchasing behaviors. Now, the first is not going to last since growth doesn't last forever. Decline also doesn't last forever. We will see in the future interest will decline. Central banks will try to adapt to the situation. And I will make one brief statement about protectionism, and I will evaluate it in a country by country basis and in the basis of companies. No matter how they try to structure their companies to circumvent it, their growth cycles and their growth structures, once they get damaged, then you have to find the middle way. And Trump will have to do the same because Microsoft, Google, Ford, he cannot continue confronting these big companies and force them to shrink because the governmental world is one world, but it is separate from the corporate world. Because now we are seeing situations where Google is dealing with China and they're meeting once and again and trying to find the common ground. But they have to find the middle ground where they can both work together and profit together. And we will keep close track of it as the audience. But this doesn't mean that this trend will continue endlessly. So deglobalization will not continue forever. But we will reach a common ground where we won't be hurt as much as we are today, and the developments are proof to that, essentially. We should never be focused too much on the effects, because then you can't foresee anything. Yes, the globe is trying to react to this, and you see the balance sheet of Fed on the left. And think of it that way. Why are these things important? Because during the downward trend that we're currently going through, both the companies and the households, they don't have capacity left enough to borrow loans. And the banks don't have enough capacity to uh, entrench their loan divisions. For example, uh, we've seen a, a discount in the interest rates in China. Even though it was small, it was a symbolic discount. It signified that a policy would come or could come that would, in effect, relax the current situation. And we've seen that the steel prices increased by 2% recently as a reaction to this discount in interest rates. So we shouldn't just look at what happened, but also examine what might happen. If we do that, we can see that the worst is behind and the future will be better than what we expect it to be like. So the financial conditions index is there and the global economic surprises index. In the conditions index, it sank incredibly in 2016 and it was good for 2 years and then it sank again and now it's increasing again and this is a cycle. So philosophically, we can discuss it like this or globally. Can we predict a momentum or an economic growth with financial figures only? For now, the answer seems like yes. But only when the financial conditions improve, we can see trends of growth. But as I always say, what happens is not important. What's important is the reactions it elicits from others. So the largest central banks or other banks, they will react to that in a fashion that promotes growth. Welcome back, Uğur Bey. So the effects of finance meetings, I mentioned that it will find its own balance in time, but for now it has an intuitive reactionary effect, which begs the question, if that is the case, then Trump or the USA, let's put it like that, if they reach an agreement and if they defer the taxes that will be sanctioned for China and remove some of the sanctions and make discounts from the taxes that are already being applied, what will happen then? So if this situation created a decline, what would the opposite of it do? So these things are slowly shaping the conditions in the future. The USA is growing its balance sheet. They started buying bonds back again. Trump and I'm saying this ironically, will hold meetings around the world and will sign agreements, and we will see some of the sanctions being deterred. Recently, China decreased the interest rates, and in the light of all of these things that I've mentioned in this previous slide, these things will come together to improve the financial conditions, and we will move toward a different system in the future thanks to these developments. Now we have several slides about the same topic since we're talking about global developments. We've seen a decline in capital production. Now, this shows us there is an aspect to Trump's China agreement. The first condition of Trump was the removal of the depreciation pressure on Chinese yuan. We've mentioned that the Chinese growth is slowing down. Now, despite this downward trend in their growth, since their economy is growing, their growth in yuan is also increasing. But as yuan depreciates, just like how it happened in Turkey, it comes under pressure because just like in our country, although we haven't grown in terms of US dollars. Now, yuan fell below 7 yesterday, and it increased to 7.18 in August and September. Now, all of these values that we've kept close track of indicate that the worst has been left behind, and once the worst is gone, in terms of the monetary policies and in terms of the protectionist policies, we will see a better future. Now, in terms of Europe, I won't be able to speak in as positive terms as I've been doing so far. There are structural problems in Europe, but at the same time, there is also hope over there as well. There are some leading indicators in the world, and using these, you can predict what will happen, how the developments will be shaped. Now, if you keep close track of what's happening in the States, you can foresee what will happen in the world. It used to be that, but now America was replaced by China because China is in the center right now as far as structures go. Now, if China develops and grows its internal markets, they will increase their imports, which will lead to an increase in the strength of European exports. Because it's impossible to foresee that Chinese imports will shrink forever. At some point, it's bound to turn around. And when it does, it will result in a situation where Europe's exports to China will increase. And to that end, what needs to happen is that China's domestic consumption needs to increase. And when you see that exports to China are increasing, this is the sign that everything is going to change again, so you need to position yourself carefully. America's interactions with the rest of the world is declining, but with their protectionist policies, they are still the topic of debates. But if they adopt the necessary changes, namely the dollar index, which has been recently increasing, if they decrease it to 96% or below, it will mean that all of the headlines that we've been talking about are going to change. There are many dominant factors around the world and in Turkey, and both psychologically and in terms of value, there is a strong possibility that the worst has truly been left behind. And this will mean that it will be different from now on. All the central banks are expanding, interest rates are decreasing, and the trade war between the USA and China is slowly becoming more and more relaxed, which will mean that we will be witnessing a different story from now on. And as I've mentioned before, the worst is behind, and from now on, we will see a system that gets more and more relaxed. But how will it affect the steel prices or the steel demand? How will it affect, or during which period or at which pace will it affect those? That is to be seen. But if we look at the data, and if we create a graph, 3 months ago, according to this hypothetical graph, while everything was in the red, we will see that they will start to go above the line and improve. And this is the latest take on the subject.
Yani 2018'in Ağustos'undan
So we have already had a really very tough year. And if we would like to put it into different words, we have paid values. So how did we pay them? We have just been downsized, and we have restructured the debts. And I mean, in return of the price that we paid, when we look at the sectoral index, of course, when we look at the reserves of the central bank, as I have already told you, so the toughest part has just been left behind. But from now on, everything is going to be turning into the normal way at step by step. The confidence index and the support that has been taken from the export shows that the indication will be in this direction. And the middle term, so our expectation is about 3% growth. So IMF and the World Bank are always expecting, and they are all expecting around 3% growth in Turkey. So the consumption is not going to be shrink if the scenario is going to be realized in this way. So everybody is speaking, you say, and we don't have the concrete estimation and the forecast about if everything is going to be lining up the same way or will go up. So, I mean, you said that you've been involved in this industry about 30 years. Mine involvement is around 10 years. But so the consumption propositions that is being given, especially in the further 10 years of time, which I have never seen that has been realized. So maybe in 3 year time we are going to be talking about 3 billion tons. So that's why please just avoid thinking that the consumption has just been slowed down. So I mean, I'm a little bit cautious about hearing this kind of thing. So the momentum and dynamic would be an indicators what will be happening in the future as well. So maybe when and the growth and the global has just been diminished at this rate, but I don't think that there will be a very rapid growth in the economy as well. But I believe that there will be some growth in Turkey as well and in the world too. So, I mean, everything is about to change in the world all of a sudden. And, for example, they may just say or declare for example, a measure to be taken for the consumption of the goods as well. Maybe in a 2 year time, the historical records could be broken down. So, we see that there is an incremental growth that we all see in the world. So there are a lot of problems that we are passing through, of course. And many of the problems, so this, I mean, my approach is completely based on the analytical analysis. So I believe that the major problems that have already been left behind. So then, I mean, 2020 is going to be the years that